In the mid-14th century, Europe was on the brink of transformation, but no one could have predicted the force that would change everything. A silent killer was coming, one that would sweep across the continent with unstoppable speed, leaving death, despair, and chaos in its wake. It was called the Black Death. It wasn't just a plague, it was a reckoning. By the time it had run its course, 1/3 of Europe's population lay dead. Cities emptied, economies shattered, and society itself was forced to confront a terrifying new reality. But the story of the Black Death is more than a story of death. It is a story of change, survival, and the seeds of a new Europe. The Black Death arrived in Europe around 1347, carried by merchant ships from the east. It was caused by Yersinia pestis, a bacterium transmitted by fleas living on rats. But it wasn't just a disease. It was a mirror reflecting every weakness in European society. Cities were crowded, sanitation was poor, and superstition ran rampant. In villages, entire families vanished overnight. In cities, streets were littered with the dead. Some historians argue the Black Death didn't just kill people, it killed the old Europe itself. The rigid feudal system, the unquestioned authority of the church, the stagnant economy. It all began to crumble under the weight of the plague. Before the Black Death, Europe's economy was built on the backs of the peasantry. Lords demanded labor, and peasants had little freedom. Life was brutal but predictable. Then the plague hit. Factories, farms, and fields emptied. There were no hands to till the soil, no merchants to trade goods, no builders to maintain cities. Suddenly, labor became scarce and valuable. Peasants, once powerless, began to demand wages. Serfs who had spent their lives tied to the land found themselves able to negotiate, to move, to assert their rights. Some argue this was the birth of modern labor rights. The Black Death was a brutal catalyst for a more mobile and empowered working class. The church had long held the ultimate authority over life and death. But the plague undermined even its power. Priests and monks, often tending the sick, died in droves. People saw the holy failing to protect them, and faith wavered. Some turned to fanaticism, others to hedonism, and still others to reason. Universities grew, science emerged. The Black Death, in a paradoxical twist, helped pave the way for the Renaissance. The very institutions that had dominated Europe's intellect were challenged, and new ideas began to take root. Economically, Europe was forced to adapt. Land that had once been cultivated by hundreds of serfs now lay fallow. Lords who survived had to offer better conditions to attract workers. Towns rebuilt, markets reopened. But change was not just economic, it was social and psychological. People who survived the plague valued life differently. Art and literature began to reflect mortality and the fleeting nature of existence. Dance of death motifs, vivid paintings, and literature like Boccaccio's Decameron grappled with the reality of mortality and human resilience. Some say the Black Death made Europe more human, more self-aware, and more ambitious. People no longer accepted the unquestioned authority of tradition. They questioned, they innovated, they sought meaning in a fragile world. The plague also reshaped urban life. Cities that had been overcrowded and disease-ridden began to rethink planning. Streets were widened, sanitation slowly improved, and trade shifted. Even global trade changed. Italy, especially Florence and Venice, became centers of banking and finance, partly because they adapted faster than others to the demographic and economic shifts caused by the plague. Some historians suggest that the Black Death indirectly accelerated Europe's path to modern capitalism. Without it, the rigid feudal system might have endured for centuries longer. The plague killed millions, but it also killed stagnation. And then there was the human cost beyond death. Revolts swept across Europe. The Jacquerie in France, the Peasants' Revolt in England. These uprisings were fueled by desperation and newfound power. The balance of power between nobility and peasantry shifted irrevocably. Even monarchies were affected. Kings had to negotiate with nobles and commoners alike. Governance evolved, slowly but inevitably, toward a more flexible, responsive state. Medicine and science, too, were transformed. The plague forced people to observe, to record, to question. While many treatments were primitive, the need for knowledge spurred innovation in medicine, public health, and urban planning. Hospitals became more organized, quarantine measures were developed, and Europe began the slow journey toward understanding disease scientifically. In the end, the Black Death was more than a tragedy, it was a turning point. Europe emerged weaker in numbers but stronger in spirit, society, and economy. We often look at disasters as pure calamities. But sometimes, history teaches us that chaos creates opportunity, that destruction can be the soil in which the seeds of progress are planted. The plague forced Europe to confront its weaknesses, question authority, and rethink its way of life. And in doing so, it forever reshaped the trajectory of Western civilization. Perhaps the Black Death's greatest legacy wasn't the death it wrought, but the Europe it helped create. Freer, more dynamic, and more resilient than it had ever been before. When we remember the Black Death, we remember the horror, the loss, the despair. But if we look closer, we see the resilience of humanity. We see the birth of a new world rising from the ashes of the old, reminding us that even in the darkest moments, transformation is possible. The Black Death changed Europe in ways no one could have imagined, from reshaping society and labor to challenging the power of the church and sparking new ideas that would eventually lead to the Renaissance. But what do you think, was the Black Death purely a tragedy, or did it also create opportunities for progress and change? How different would Europe have been if the plague had never happened? And in today's world, what lessons can we learn from the way societies responded to such a devastating crisis? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I want to know what you think. History is written not only by the victors, but by those who survived the worst.